What's going on, everybody? Welcome to IndieQuest, a celebration of the indie and obscure. I am one of your hosts today, Josh, and I'm joined by one of my splendiferous co-hosts, Steve. How are you today?
Doing fantastic. Excited to talk about a good video game. I'm on either the tail end or the start of an illness that's been running through our house. It's not clear to me, but no increased white blood cell count is going to stop me from talking to my boys.
We're also joined by the captain himself, Captain Drachma. How's it going, Seth?
Good. We also have sickness going through our house. My wife had COVID for the last week. She's negative now for the last couple of days. And fortunately, we managed to split ourselves up enough that no one else in our household got it. So that's pretty cool.
That's nice.
That's awesome.
And now she's feeling better. So I'm just here ready to talk about a cool game with you fellas.
Awesome. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about, we're going to continue our SuperGiant game, review breakdowns. We played through and are going to discuss Transistor today, which is the game from 2014 that they released, their second game. What we do with reviews focus episode is we will talk all about the game. We'll talk loosely about the plot with no spoilers. We'll talk about some mechanics, and we'll put it on the quest log. And then after we kind of plug and say our goodbyes, we'll do a little spoiler chat at the end. This one probably won't be super long with the spoilers. There's a couple of things maybe we'll want to talk about the end of the story probably. But besides that, we're going to just dive into this game and talk about our feelings.
Fun fact, we say this is part of our SuperGiant review series, us breaking down every SuperGiant game. We're so good at being consistent with a review series that we reviewed Bastion, the game prior to this, in episode 86, almost 20 episodes ago. But we are back to it now. We are three men of our words, and we intend to play these video games on our... I won't speak for my guys here, but I'll say on our march towards Hades, we continue to play these games. And
basically.
Transistor. I am excited because Transistor is the one of all of their games that I had been recommended the most, but had not checked out. I have a lot of friends that really like this game. And when I told people that I played Bastion and I played Hades as the two I've actually played, most people would be like, oh, dude, you got to check out Transistor. You got to play Transistor. So this was, it was just a good backlog playthrough for me. It was good to kind of finally round that out and have some context for what people are talking about.
Mm-hmm. I think this is our first time for all three of us, right, Seth? This is the first time I played it as well.
Yeah, first time I've played it. It's been on my Steam library for quite a while, but I had never gotten around to it. And honestly, I don't know that I have ever even watched a trailer about this game. And we'll get into how this game, what this game looks like and plays, obviously, in a little bit. But I didn't even know what the gameplay was in Transistor until I started playing Transistor.
You know what's funny about that? I knew a little bit about Transistor. I knew that it was slower paced than Bastion. People have described it as a little more intentional. But the only time I ever watched any gameplay was many, many years ago. It was a Games Done Quick speedrun marathon. I went to turn it on for the day to watch, and someone was speedrunning Bastion. And I watched it for a minute, and I'm like, what am I doing? I've never played this game. I shouldn't be watching this. And so I turned it off. And even though that was a tiny, insignificant memory, when I got to that part in this playthrough, I was like, yo, this is the part I saw in that speedrun that one time. So it was all right.
Emblazoned in your mind.
It's true. It activated some latent information in the back of my brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got this. I think it was a PS Plus game in 2014 when it came out, near launch, and so I just have it on my PlayStation, and I booted up, played 45 minutes to an hour, but had zero memory of it. So because that's 11 years ago. So at this point, so it was pretty much all fresh for me. Just I didn't even remember what the combat system was like at all. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. This is different. So yeah, we'll talk about it.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I knew about Transistor, and I think I've showed you guys this before, but sitting to the left of me is a window, and the shade, the curtain doesn't perfectly cover this corner of the window, And so a beam of light will come and hit me directly in the eye in the morning. But a long time ago, a friend of mine was clearing out his collection, and one of the things he had was a figure of Red from Transistor in the box. And he gave it to me like, here you go, man. And I was like, oh, thanks, I guess. I don't know anything about her, but all right. And so this boxed figure has been the thing that I like push against the curtain to like close that sun gap. And so it's been literally for like 5 years. It's been very utilitarian for me. But finally now I can look over and be like, I understand your journey.
Yeah, it's like, you don't just block the sun for me. I get you.
Yep. You mean something.
All right. Well, should we just jump into it? Should I read the description for the game here for everybody?
Yeah, let's go.
I think. All right. Awesome. So, Transistor is from the creators of Bastion. This description's from the Steam page. Transistor is a sci-fi themed action RPG that invites you to wield an extraordinary weapon of unknown origin as you fight through a stunning futuristic city. Transistor seamlessly integrates thoughtful strategic planning into a fast-paced action experience, melding responsive gameplay and rich atmospheric storytelling. During the course of the adventure, you will piece together the Transistor's mysteries as you pursue its former owners. Pretty solid.
Very much
so. The game kind of opens and you get thrown into this world. It's a top-down game. It looks like a Supergiant game. And the game has a combat system that's very unique. We can go into it here. Yeah. It has a little bit of action, and then it has this thing called the turn, which freezes time, and then you can plan out your attacks, which is the unique, I think, hook for the gameplay of this game.
Yeah, it's very XCOM-like in that way. A game that I played recently that does this basically the exact same way is Arco. Arco does very identical, other than in Transistor, when you pause the game, or whatever you want to call it, where you can actually choose your moves. There's nothing else actually moving. In Arco, things are slowly moving towards you while you're doing that stuff, right? So you can still see the bullets moving. In Transistor, it's like you have a set amount of time, and it's not like timed like a stopwatch or anything, but there's a timer, like a bar at the top of the screen where you're allowed to do certain actions, and different actions take up more time on that because they do more damage, or maybe you're running or things like that, right? And they fill up that bar that way. So you have to be very strategic with selections of different, that's something we'll get into, different functions as you start to do that turn. So hopefully I didn't cut you guys off. You have anything else to say about that?
No, the thing that I haven't even played this game, but the thing that it reminded me of hearing other people talk about is that Fallout was the VAT system or something in Fallout where you can like slow down and like choose body parts. You're not choosing individual body parts, but it's the same in that way where it is a mix of real time and sort of turn-based, plan-based. You can, in theory, play the entire game as if it was like a Bastion or a Hades. Like when you're not planning your turns, it feels like what I guess is that signature Supergiant play style where it's kind of isometric. You're running around, you're hitting with a bunch of different abilities that have different like AoEs and effects, and you can apply debuffs and all sorts of stuff. But that turn mechanic is where this game sets itself apart from especially Bastion in my mind, but also slows things down a little bit. And you can be a little more intentional because there is like enemies will take extra damage if you hit them from the back, or like I said, there's AoEs, so you can try to kind of like strategically clump certain enemies to get hit by the same attack and get a little more extra sauce out of it. The order of the moves you use is often very relevant, so you can plan your turn that way. It's interesting and it's different. It was after playing Bastion, I appreciated the like extra layer that this added on.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting too, because when you go into the turn and you because you have what is it? It's 3 functions, right? Or 4. It's 4. It's the face buttons, 4, right?
Yeah,
I think
4.
Yeah. Okay, so the 4 functions, if you use them up during turn, there's a timer where you can't attack. So that's kind of the risk reward there. So you go through and you plan out the thing. If you didn't plan correctly, maybe there's somebody that potentially could kill you, quote unquote, which will deactivate when your functions, which is an interesting death mechanic. As the functions go away, it makes it harder to do the combat, obviously, and then kind of adds to the tension of the combat. But what's nice and something I actually tried to do is go in without using turn, and everything's unlimited. There's no timers. But the thing is they will start spawning so many enemies in where you kind of are almost forced to use turn, at certain segments and areas of the game. So, but it's a nice challenge for yourself. It's like, oh yeah, there's 5 guys in here. I can kick their asses, and you try, and then they start spawning in more dudes, or they have like a secondary attack or a shield, or you have the limiters on, which are similar to like the what's it called in Hades,
Heat.
the
Heat or the tonics or whatever they were.
Yeah, they're tonics. Yeah. Similar idea. I turned all those on as soon as I got them, just because I knew the game was short, and why not make it a little more challenging? But it's like, it's going to be, you're going to have to use the turn. You're going to have to use that strategic element, but it's fun to give yourself extra challenges. Why not?
I've got a question for you guys since we're talking about it. To me, the combat, at least the initial learning curve of the combat, was like one part cool and then one part annoying, because I don't love when a game tells me how to do everything, right? But this game definitely does not tell you much. It kind of, hey, press right trigger or R2 or whatever to get turn to come up. And then it's like, okay, now you can attack like this, right? And that's it. That's all the game ever tells you, as far as I could tell, right? There's not really a whole lot of hand-holding in that way. So it really took me, and I don't know about you guys, but it took me several battles to really start to understand what I'm supposed to be doing. It almost makes Transistor one of those kinds of games where if I were to play this game again, I would have a completely different experience, right, than playing it the first time.
I 100% agree with you that the onboarding was a little choppy, although my perception of it personally is that I felt like I was bringing bad habits from other SuperGiant games. Like, this is definitely slower than other SuperGiant games. Like I said, you can play it like a Hades or a Bastion and never use turn, but the attack animations for almost every function is so long. Like, it's like multiple seconds of like flourish and attack, to the point where they're very clearly trying to discourage you from playing that way in most cases. And even like the character's movement speed is pretty slow. Almost every enemy in the game outspeeds you. And so I would actually find myself often like going into sort of like autopilot and just playing the game like I play other SuperGiant games, especially Hades, because if you like do the stacked bar chart of all of my SuperGiant hours, it's like 98% Hades. So
yeah,
I just lean into the Hades muscle memory, and I would often find myself being like, why is this so rough? Why am I doing so poorly? And then I realized, I haven't used turn in 15 minutes. Maybe I should start actually engaging with the mechanics.
As soon as turn was available to me, I think I used it every time I attacked, practically, unless there was like an enemy or a couple enemies left, and I knew I could just quickly dispatch them, right? Like get rid of them. Otherwise, I'm turning constantly. Like maybe a little bit very early on, I would kind of dabble with other things, but I'm like, I'm basically always getting hit, and this is not fun. Like, there's got to be a better way to do this. Okay, turn is the answer. Turn is what the game wants you to do. It's how the game wants you to play it. So that's kind of how I played it for the majority of my playthrough. And then obviously as you get rolling with the game, and maybe we can start mentioning some functions since we're here, right?
Yeah.
You get a lot of different what they call in the game functions, but to me or to most people in layman's terms, it would just be like abilities, right? So at the very start, you get 4 of these that you can map to all 4 face buttons, and you're like, okay, I've got my abilities now. I can use these as I need to. I can use turn with them, and I can chain stuff together. But then as soon as you get the 5th one, you're like, oh, so this isn't what I'm doing? Like, I can actually swap these out, and then you realize that functions work in a totally different way. And to me, this is maybe one of the strongest suits of Transistor, in my opinion, is that the customization of the way that you're allowed to battle in this game is almost limitless, because a function can be an active attack, so you can map it to a button, right? And then you can use that as an attack, and it tells you what it does, and you can test it out in battle. Of course, you can actually, it's kind of cool, you can actually test it out outside of battle without punishing yourself. Like, you don't have like MP or something like that, so you can just try stuff when there's no enemies around. You can use it as an enhancement on an active, so each active slot has slots underneath it up to 2, and as you progress through the game, you can unlock both of those, but initially each one has only 1. You can use another function on top of a function that you're currently using as your active, and it will like give it a buff, right? So it might stun an enemy, or it might have a slight chance at charming an enemy, right? So in RPG terms, charming, right? So make them your friend and fight with you for a little bit. And then as you progress through the game, you can also use each of these potential active or enhancements as passives. So you can unlock passive slots too. And then you don't have to worry about like, oh, I really like the premise of this function, but I don't really like how it works in battle. I don't really like how it works as an attachment. But the passive almost always does like a lower degree of what it would do as an active, but all the time, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So hopefully I explained that in the way you guys would have, or add on top of it.
So
Perfect.
There's something like 15 functions or something in the game, and so I mean you can do the math. Every function can have 2 other functions slotted into it that change it often in pretty significant ways, and even more than that, if let's say you have the function crash, which is kind of like a typical attack / stun, and then you slot the function tap, which is kind of like a lower damage rapid fire. If you slot tap into crash, it will make crash faster generally, but it'll maintain the properties of crash. But if you do the inverse of that, you get an entirely different ability. So depending on which one you put in the active or the passive, or the active or like the enhancement slot, it's not like the same 2 produce the same result. If you put tap as your active and then you make the enhancement one crash, now you have that fast attack that has a little mini stun on top of it every time. And so, I mean, that with 2 different enhancement slots and the passives, there's got to be literally like hundreds of unique attacks available in this game.
My favorite example of this is there's a function called load, which is like it basically lays down landmines, right? And so you can kind of plan out, if you understand how enemies move, right? You can kind of plan out and have them walk into these mines, right? Especially if they're following you. I personally did not love using the mines. I tried to, and I just didn't like that hope and wait and see. Yeah. But as an attachment, it increases the area of effect of the majority of functions, which is amazing. Like so many things, it's great to have a big area of effect, and you can hit multiple enemies. So while I would not use that as an active, it is still a fantastic attachment, or even a passive, right? So that's just my example for that.
Yeah, I like to do the dash. I usually had dash on triangle because it just kind of that's how they originally put it in there. And I guess I just felt like that was right, but I was nice to put like a crash or something that does damage on your dash. So like, say you have a couple little bots left after you do load, you can just dash around because the dash is like not metered, so you can just dash around and kill the last 2 or 3 stragglers, which I thought that was just a nice little, something I just found out, which I'm sure that was something they purposely did because like that actually does speed up the non-load, or what is it, the non strategic combat, the actual real time, so that was cool. I think this is just a really fun, like, to the thing that's really cool is when you don't die when you lose your health, you lose your functions. I know that sounds really frustrating to a lot of people, but you do gain them back after a couple save spots. But what's really cool to do is just, well, I lost 2 of my functions in this battle. What am I going to do? Is just change everything up just to see what happens and to just try some weird combo that you never tried before. And then maybe you found a new combo that's just like that's perfect for your playstyle, which I think that's what they really wanted people to do with this system. So
I 100% agree. It happened to me a lot where I'd lose what I felt like was a core function where I was like, I should just restart, honestly. Like, this is ridiculous. And then I would try something else and I'd be like, oh, this is actually now going to be my new standard. Yeah. Because this is better. I just never thought to try it before. or I don't know if you guys ever did this, but I several times during the game, there's sometimes where they do it for you, but several times during the game, I either through exhaustion or just feeling creative, I would just unequip everything that I had, and I'd be like, all right, let me just set up a new build now with no like assumptions of what I was just using, so that over the course of playing the game, I used pretty much every function in a variety of ways. That like I had a couple that were like my staples, but there was no function that I can think of outside of like maybe one or two that I like just left off the table. I was always experimenting, and the combat pretty much always allowed me to do whatever the heck I wanted.
Yeah, and like speaking of mixing and matching functions, another thing that the game does, and like a massive part of what makes functions and slotting functions important, is there is a bar, a meter, I suppose, called memory, that you have to, each function can only consume so much memory. So I don't know about you guys, but as you level up, you can pick more functions, and you can also choose to like expand memory or expand slots on your actives and things like that. I almost always chose memory when it was available because I was always ready to slot something in. But as soon as I got like the extra 4 memory at any time, I did that too, Steve, where it's like, what's not essential here? What can I slot in now? I have 4 extra memory. In this game's terms, that's like massive. Like you can do so much with 4 memory. So that was always okay, well, I guess we're going to sit here and theory craft for 10 minutes to figure out how I'm going to put this together and then move on to the next battle. So very smart, very cool. The only thing I will say that was kind of and I kind of, not to just shit on this, but the fact that, and it's kind of the same thing in Bastion. Bastion starts you out with a couple weapons, right? And you get more and more weapons as you go through the game. You might find your ultimate all-time favorite weapon an hour before you're about to finish, which is a bummer.
Yeah.
This Transistor does the exact same thing. You can get your favorite function right before the end of the game, and it's like, man, I really wish I had that for the entire game. So to me, that's where this game really starts out pretty slow. And I don't know how you guys feel about that, but it's pretty slow. It kind of chugs along for a little bit, and you feel pretty limited, and then it opens up massively. And they did these things way better. It just suits itself because Hades does the same thing. We're not talking about Hades today, but it does a similar thing where you have to unlock weapons. But Hades is like multiple tens of hours. Right? 100 hours. So you're going to get to experiment. It's a roguelite. I feel like SuperGiant kind of figured that out as they went on, because they're like, how do we make it so that our players can get to experience their favorite things, but for longer? Well, just make it a never-ending game. You know what I mean? So, but that would be my biggest gripe about this, is that you don't get some of the really cool abilities until it's almost too late.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like kind of like, both games, Bastion and Transistor, both at the end are like, hey man, just play it again with all the powers.
Yeah.
You got that power 20 minutes before the end.
Yeah.
Try it again with everything and get more memory and have everything unlocked and give it a shot. So I did not do a second full playthrough. I did jump in and played for like an hour just to see how it would feel. Steve, you said you played it twice, right?
Yeah, so I played the entire New Game Plus through, and I agree. I think this game is pretty much universally better on the second playthrough, because I 100% agree with you. There's at least one ability I can think of that was one of my go-tos that you get right before you go to what is essentially the final dungeon. Like right before you enter the final leg of the game, you get this ability at like the 75% mark, if not more. And the game tries to account for that a little bit. I think Bastion did too, where when you level up and you choose new abilities, you can sometimes choose between multiple, where it's like you have the option of which one to pick. But some of the abilities, especially the ones I'm talking about, are story-based abilities that you get at certain spots in the game. So you'll just never get them early. But yeah, the New Game Plus is where it's best, especially because, I mean, you start with all of your abilities. You can have full creativity over your build. You have all the memory to do whatever you want. I don't know if we actually mentioned it, but yeah, different functions take different amounts of memory. So some of the ones that the game thinks are stronger cost more, although I would argue that that's not really always the case. But what's really cool about New Game Plus with the functions is that as you play through, you will re-unlock all of the abilities again, and you can slot an ability within itself. So it adds even more layers of like customization.
Wow.
And most of the time it's just creating like a supercharged version of that ability. But, if I put Crash into Crash, now the stun lasts like 150% longer, which is a long time now, and like kind of changes how you play, which is pretty neat.
Yeah. I have to ask, Steve, is the ability you're referring to Cull? Because Cull was the big one for me. At the
Void.
end.
Void,
Void,
actually.
Oh, Void. Yes, I also used Void. I used Void as like an attachment to Cull, I think. Because Cull was just like a massive close range, like nuke almost. I would kill everything so quickly, single targets at the end of the game, right? Like I was just bang, 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 like just moving through them. So,
okay, that actually, this is a good point. We can describe what the abilities do and not just the names for people, but like, I'm curious what your guys' like go-to ability combos were, because there was one for sure that I had the entire game once I had it available, and it was like one of my only non-negotiables is the dash on triangle with Spark, which is an ability that drops a bunch of like little electric spark balls down, kind of like what Josh was saying. And then I attached Purge to that, which is an ability that adds a damage over time. Like it shoots out a little ball, and if it hits enemies, it does damage over time. But when you combine both of those together, every spark ball launches out its own little purge. So every time you dash, it launches like 10 to 15 dot like seekers out, and it basically would just hit every enemy in the level. So I would start every combat just like dash, like dashing a box around the room, and I would apply a damage over time effect to every single enemy, and then I would just start cleaning them up after that. It was so ridiculously overpowered that it
awesome.
It almost breaks the combat sometimes, because that damage over time does like half of their health in a lot of cases. It's super strong. So that was my OP go-to.
I like to use Spark. Like I just like the main attack, and then I'd experiment a lot, but usually it would have load because it makes it bigger, and then I would do something like I would just play around with that. Sometimes I put ping, so it like go really fast too. So I just thought that was one of the more powerful attacks that you get early on, and I kind of stuck with that as one of my basic attacks, and then kind of experimented with the other slots. But I did have the dash plus that, it's kind of like the two that felt when I was playing, I was like, this is me at home in this game.
Yeah.
Throw a couple sparks out and dash around, so that was kind of my main two, and then I would experiment with the other two slots.
As I do in a lot of games, I got up close and personal to most enemies, or as many enemies as I could. So I had bounce to just like kind of deal with groups of enemies, get some damage on them. And then I would get close, and as soon as I got Call, I comboed Call, and then I had a couple attachments. I think I had Crash attached to Call, and then Void attached to Call. And then I had Breach, which is like the ranged ability you get at the very beginning. But I had Spark as an attachment on Breach, so that it would do like 3, 1 down the middle and then 2 on either side. But I would use it close, so that every single, it was like a shotgun. I would call
pretty much
a bunch of damage and then shotgun. So I would just delete every enemy, and then I would wait for turn to come up. I would always jaunt some dash right after I was out to get away while all the enemies were kind of coming closer to me, wait for turn to power back up, and then do it again. So
that's awesome. I want people to just like fast forward to this podcast and just hear that segment of it just saying a bunch of random words and just have no clue what's going on.
But yeah, other than that, I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on the combat. I will say that one, I don't know if this is a criticism of my play style or of the game, but I feel like it's of the game. One thing that kind of frustrated me as I played through is, after you use turn, it disables pretty much all your abilities other than like dash and like a stealth ability that you get. It's called Mask. There's a couple that you can use, but you're pretty much just a sitting duck for like 5 seconds or so. And there were definitely times where I was frustrated that this game has like essentially no defensive options or utility at all. Because there's sometimes where an enemy would just be chasing me. This was most egregious in like the optional bonus rooms that you can do, the wave based mode.
Yeah.
But like especially like the dogs that were fast enemies, sometimes they would just be like following me, and I could not avoid taking damage, and it just felt like, well, I have no agency here. And it's not like I failed to plan. Like I just executed a turn on the other side of the map from these guys that killed every other enemy. They just ran over to me during my moment of weakness and started attacking me. And if I don't specifically have dash as one of my abilities, I just have no recourse. I just have to take hits, which felt kind of gross.
A little cheap, yeah.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I think I used whatever the charm ability. Switch? Is that the charm ability? I don't know. Whichever one is like charms enemies. I think I had that. Yes. So I had that as my passive. So it would spawn as soon as I got a kill, it would spawn friendly bad cells. And that would basically create a bad cell, which would redirect enemy attacks to that enemy. So I could get away from a moment, right? It didn't last forever, but I would be able to kind of move away and kind of delay and make up some time between when I got turned back. But I feel the exact same way. And you mentioned the dogs, Steve. when the dogs are chasing you down, I feel like the dude in the transistor is always like, he's getting close to you or whatever. I'm like, what do you want me to do? He's gonna get me. Like there's nothing I can do. This dog is too fast.
It feels like when you're playing like World of Warcraft or something, and you aggro a mob too high above your level, and you're running away, but there's nothing to be done here. Like the math is settled. I'm dead. I'm just delaying that. That's often what it felt like.
I think that it would, for that time, they should maybe have added like some type of block ability with your giant sword that you have. You know what I mean? You just hit L2 and then you just have like a deflect or something. I think that would have added to the combat, right?
Yeah, give me like a perfect parry or something, not to turn this into Bayonetta or whatever, but like give me one option where I can like strategically deflect an attack.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait for the transistor heads to be like, you idiots. It's actually such and such and such.
Yeah, like, maybe one of the abilities is an infinite use shield.
I know there's some of them, if you throw them in your passive, they do like extend your limit, right, and things like that, or extend your whole turn time, I guess, timeline or whatever. I don't know if that has anything to affect with that, but or maybe there's a cooldown one I missed or something. Like the cooldown's like 1 second or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I forget which one it is. Bounce or crash. One of those. One of them gives you a shield that takes one hit for you that recharges every like 10 seconds or something. And that was my equivalent of your dropping the little mines everywhere to take aggro. Is I like, well, I can at least absorb one hit and hopefully turn comes back up and this thing recharges by the time I am going to take another hit. But several times I was like, man, I just need some defensive abilities here. And like Josh was saying, come at me, Transistor super freaks, and tell me, well, it sounds like you just made a really aggressive build with no defensive utility and you're mad about it.
Glass cannon.
Yeah, it's like, if you never cast Cure, it's not my problem. It's like,
exactly.
Well, that goes back to what Drachma was saying about the game tutorializing. They never guided me away from my bad habits, if that's the case.
Yep.
Well, I think that's all the combat. You guys have any other comments on that before I kind of pivot here on the combat?
I think my closing thoughts are, if anybody has not played Transistor, that sounded like a bunch of gibberish. Long story short, starts off a little bit slow, and if you don't love the combat, I would say give it some time because it gets better. And especially about the halfway point of the game, you're like, okay, now I get it. That's kind of, to me, I feel like that's a lot of the commentary around this game is, I didn't really like the combat at first, so I kind of bounced off it. But when I went back to it, it made more sense. And once I got to a certain point, things really open up. So that's what I'll say. If anybody's struggling with the combat, just give it some time.
I would say I generally think this is overall a pretty solid improvement over Bastion's combat. So, like, if I had to pick one or the other, I would take Transistor every day.
Yeah, I just love the unique it's so. In a million years, I would never be able to come up with this combat system. It's so unique. I don't know if I played a game that is exactly this like versatile, and so like it's combining so many different elements from so many different games and genres into something that works. Of course, we have our gripes with it, but after you play it for like I say, like Seth was saying, give it like an hour and a half. You're gonna start slowly getting it, and then you're just gonna be like, oh, it's just gonna click. There's like a light bulb's gonna turn on, and you're gonna be like, hell yeah, this is working for me. So I know that I see somebody in Discord say something about that. They're like, I tried this and all my functions broke and I couldn't use it anymore and I just turned it off. You know, I think somebody gets frustrated about that. But they don't permanently take your powers away. Yeah. So don't freak out if you see one of your powers go away. No, they'll come back. Just give it a couple save points and you're good to go and you can slot that guy back in. So well, so for each of these different functions, there's actually some story. I guess we can talk a little bit about the story and like the art style. The presentation for this game is like amazing. It's all hand painted like you would expect from, SuperGiant. Like you think SuperGiant, you think style, right? Like at least I do when I think of their games. Is like the art's going to be beautiful. The music's going to be awesome, probably by Darren Korb, right? It's going to be amazing. So anything you guys want to say about the presentation?
The main thing I will say is if Bastion is like a prototype to Hades, Transistor is like, oh, this is what we want. Like, this is it. Because as soon as I started playing Transistor, I was like, oh, I'm playing Hades. I'm playing a different version of Hades right now. It looks so Hades. Like, it really looks. So if anybody out there, Hades is an extremely popular game, and I'm sure a lot of people have played it or at least seen it. Transistor looks and feels a lot like that, which is a very good thing.
Yeah, very much so. And I'm sorry that we keep bringing up Hades, but like you have to understand, in the SuperGiant world, Hades is the sun in the center. It has the largest gravitational force. It's impossible to avoid. I do agree that Transistor felt like an improvement by pretty much every metric over Bastion. I think moving past just visually, I would say Transistor to me feels like a universally improved sequel to Bastion. It feels like very much like a follow-up to Bastion that basically by every category, every metric, punched things up a little to a lot. Combat's better, art direction is better, soundtrack I like more, stories like a little more, at least a little more involved. I don't know if it's a little more coherent, but like there's more to it than understand than what was in Bastion. So yeah, looks incredible. I really like that this is something different. I mean, I know that this was their second game, so this is only true upon the reflection of the weird order that I've played these in, but this being a little more cyberpunky, like a little more like like Neon City at nighttime kind of energy was a cool twist, a cool change up from, kind of the more fantasy-ish Bastion or the very unique style that Hades has. I liked the look of it, and I was surprised by how linear the game was, but it was pretty easy to understand where there was a little bit of side action, because you can often like walk behind paintings of buildings and stuff like that, but they don't usually hide too much behind them, and when they do, the game will kind of nudge you in that direction. It's still usually pretty clear where you can explore and where some optional stuff is going to be. So like the visual design is not so cluttered or distracting that it doesn't make for good gameplay on top of it. I just really, really like the look of it.
Yeah, I think that all in all, like you said, with the cyberpunk feel, like that goes into the music. Like take the Hades, like the music's gonna be awesome. I'm just comparing to Hades again. Sorry, people, but take that idea and just kind of add a little bit maybe of like EDM influence here and there, a little bit of electronic sounding added, just mixed in with it, a little bit of just techno beats in the background, things like that, and then like the sound of all the different attacks has such a crunch feel to it and a robotic energy to it. And yeah, they have like these little interstitial like things to continue the storyline with like her riding a motorcycle. Like, it's a nice, beautiful painting that kind of moves a little bit, and it just looks really nice and polished. And of course, we have the same voice actor for the Transistor, because the Transistor talks to you as the narrator of the game. Similar to how Bastion has a narrator, this one kind of talks to the main character who cannot talk. It's the same voice actor, Logan Cunningham, and he has like a little bit of a robot-y voice. And, he does such a good job. Again, it's like, just keep using this guy forever, please, at this point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like, like, I think it's the movie The Fly, right, where there's like the guy in the cloning chamber or whatever, and then a fly gets in there, and so the clone is a fly man. This feels like they put Bastion in the cloning chamber, and then last second, Daft Punk ran into the cloning chamber too, and it merged Bastion with Daft Punk to create a new game.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's an awesome way to put it.
For me personally, regarding music, I thought the soundtrack was really good, but I prefer Bastion's soundtrack to this one. Personally,
he's coming in with the first disagreement of the episode. Let me crack these knuckles.
It wouldn't be very much fun if we all just agreed with each other the entire time. So, I mean, I still think it's really great, and a lot of my favoritism, I suppose, towards Bastion might be nostalgia, and I've listened to so much of that soundtrack so many times.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I just personally enjoy that soundtrack more. I agree with the rest of what you guys said. Clearly, this is an upgrade in art style, although Bastion certainly has like a very unique, interesting art style that, to me, that's not a detraction of it. For me personally, but yeah, I mean, Transistor is much more smooth, much more appealing to the majority of people's eyes, I would say.
I'd be curious how much of that is like them, like the abilities of their team improving versus is this style kind of more in the wheelhouse of the artists and they're more comfortable in like a more cyberpunky style,
right,
or if it's mostly down to the fact that I think the scope of Transistor has actually shrunk relative to Bastion. Like Bastion's not really long, but Transistor is like a pretty tight, short, linear experience. So it's very dense in a lot of ways. It's dense in the creativity of the combat. It's dense in how many abilities they let you customize, because they've mashed it all down into this one space. And the art kind of feels the same way, where it's like, well, maybe there's just literally less to draw, less art to do. I know how games work. And so they were able to give everything a second pass or something. I don't know, but it really comes out to something that is very effective, and I actually think pretty unique too. Cyberpunk is an easy touch point, but I don't think that there's a lot of games that look like Transistor, and Transistor doesn't look like Cyberpunk 2077 or something like that. It still looks like its own thing and still has whatever that intangible SuperGiant flair is.
For sure.
Yeah, that identity, right? Yep. They even have it with the functions. I did allude to this a little bit, but each function is basically like a trace cell from a character. So when you go into the menus, you can actually look at like a little backstory for each of these characters that the functions are based off of. And they have that SuperGiant character portrait right there next to the whole thing. And like, you can just see the lineage going forward as you play these games, which is really fascinating to me. I think this is... that was so creative, and I thought the story was pretty good. I was kind of lost, honestly, half the time here and there. Like, there's so many like proper nouns thrown at you in this game at first. I was like, okay, so this person did this. I know what the main story is, but there's like this whole like background story that's going with it that I was just kind of like, what is going on? Did you guys feel that too, or just me?
Regarding both combat, which we've already touched on, and story, this game is not afraid to just push you into the dump tank, the dunk tank, I should say, right? So it throws the baseball right at that target and hits every time. Like you're dunking right into that cold water, because it just expects you to figure it out, right? You're on the tracks, and if you want to try to read stuff and figure out what's happening, I will say that same, Josh. I was confused up until about maybe an hour and a half before it finished, and then I'm like, I think I get it. And we can talk more about it in the spoiler section, of course, what we each think, but for the most part, it makes sense, and then you kind of understand sort of what's going on. But I think there is a lot up for interpretation too.
Yeah, I'm just going to come out and be honest here. In other games that we put behind a spoiler wall, sometimes we have like pretty meticulous, like mapped out story beats that we want to talk about, and we're going to bring you through like all the mid to late game events. I think this time it's going to be more vibes based, because I don't know that any of the three of us 100% clocked the finer details of the story. I also don't know how much that matters. Like, I think you get the vibe of Transistor's story and the general idea enough of what's going on to propel you forward without knowing like the very specific motivations of character names that you hear twice in the entire game. Like, you're still compelled to move forward. And for like super lore heads, you know, there is a lot of times very detailed, where Josh was saying there's like character portraits. As you use abilities in different ways, the game is actually encouraging you to experiment with abilities, because when you use an ability in all of its different potential opportunities as an active, passive, or enhancement, once you've done that, you unlock like the kind of the character bio history and the events leading right up to when you found them about the character that maps to that ability. But it's like a 5-paragraph essay, and it's a little bit of that. I don't know if you guys ever did these questions in school back in the day, but I remember in like, I don't know, it must have been elementary, middle school, they would give you like a math problem that's like 5 sentences, and one of the sentences would be irrelevant to the problem, and the actual thing you needed to do is figure out what information didn't matter and strike that out. It's almost like that, where they're giving you a lot of backstory that actually isn't relevant at all unless you like really care about, you know, where this person worked or something like that. But then there's obviously going to be bits that are explaining like how they came to be mixed in with the threads of this story as well. So I read some of those. I skipped some of those because it's a lot of reading, and I was just generally very content to go with the flow on this one. I think that's okay.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I maybe read like 3 of them or something. So I agree. But I thought it was cool that it was there. If they have it was obviously a very planned out and very thought out like world and universe that they were trying to build there. Maybe they planned this as a first in a series, and they decided to go pivot and do something else. I'm not sure how that would happen behind the scenes, but it kind of almost feels like they were like, okay, this is going to be the Transistor universe. Let's try to build up a bunch of stuff and maybe possibly do a number 2, you know, but they never did. They just made Pyre instead. So that's just me hypothesizing. I don't know, obviously, but they had a lot there. There's a lot of dense material there to kind of unearth if you want to.
Yeah, I love that you said SuperGiant was thinking about doing a number 2. That got me. And I held it back until
like,
right now.
That's like, is that foreshadowing to where you want to put it on the quest log? Huh?
Or Hades too. So I feel like we've danced around it a lot. Maybe I'll just try to give it a very brief synopsis of what you find out about what's going on in this game from like the start, right? So we've kind of mentioned her, but you play as this character named Red, who was this seemingly famous singer of some kind, right? So you kind of see
she's Chaperone, right? Chaperone of the universe there or whatever.
Yep. So she was very talented. Posters all over the place. You see posters of her as you're walking through the game. But events led to her losing her voice completely. She couldn't say anything. She couldn't hum. She couldn't do anything. She finds this like futuristic looking sword. Turns out that is the Transistor. And the sword itself consumes the soul of the person who it killed, right? Sort of. So that's who's talking for Red, and kind of it's kind of like video game way of making it so it's okay for a narrator to talk the entire time, right? And explain what's happening. But I found it very interesting because as you're walking through the world, and I don't think this is very spoilery, you find like different machines that tell you like, oh, you can vote on the weather and things like that. This is a very futuristic world that we're talking about here. Lots of far-reaching futuristic ideas, right? So, but you can like do votes and you can comment on things, and that is the way that Red can speak. So that in those machines, that is how Red and the Transistor talk to each other. Otherwise, the Transistor is just kind of explaining what's going on and almost asking Red questions as you're walking, knowing full well that not going to receive an answer. But it's a very interesting dynamic. I thought at the beginning, I was like, I wish this dude would shut up. And then as the game went on, I was like, okay, it makes way more sense now that I have more context. Right. So
yes. I will kind of agree with you that I sometimes wished he would shut up. I would say maybe there's like, he might talk like 15% too often. Sometimes I'm like, it's the notes you don't play that makes the music good. Right? Like sometimes you're just stringing just comment, and I'm a little bit exhausted. But yes, I like their dynamic, and it does like make more sense in that context. I liked the world. They actually don't really explore this very much in the game. It's almost treated as like a given, like an assumption, like what they're talking about. But yeah, this is very clearly some sort of like futuristic, probably kind of like closed society where they're sort of like, they have the ability to like create, like you said, the weather or the structure of the city to how they want. It reminded me a lot of 1,000 Times Resist, where it's like, it seems like this relatively small population of people living in this kind of closed garden sort of world. And you don't ever get a sense of what's beyond this, if there even is a beyond this, because the stakes are all just about that space. And it was, I often felt myself yearning for like, just give me a little more, tell me a little bit more backstory about the place and not the people. That's what I want to know.
Yeah. I can agree with that. Did you guys have Seth, you played on PC, but Steve, did you play with the controller sound on?
Yeah.
With the guy talking to you through the controller?
Yep.
I'm a sucker for gimmicks, man. Like, I'm sorry. He's talking to me through the controller. I'm happy,
I will say, I know that there's like controller speaker fans are too afraid to stick their head out. Like they've been mocked too much. It's like people who enjoy Wii motion controls. They just have learned to stay silent because the overwhelming masses will knock them out of the sky. But I will say that in this game in particular, I think it actually does work really well to have the Transistor's voice come out of the speaker, because one, his voice is coming out of the weapon that you carry. The controller is your weapon that you're using. And two, they've applied like a tinny sort of computer speakery filter to the voice anyways. So it's sounding kind of tinny coming out of like a cheaper speaker in the controller isn't really a detraction or a downside. It's very in keeping with how they wanted it to sound anyways.
Yeah, I just thought it was cool. And I agree. It's just like, it felt like he was talking to me from my hands playing the game, which, it added a little bit. But I can agree with you guys that he's a little too chatty. And sometimes he would say the same thing, just worded just slightly differently sometimes. It's like, maybe cut that line. You know what I mean? I agree with that.
It's funny you guys say that. I don't remember which one of you said it earlier, and it was like, oh, he's kind of got like a robotic sound or whatever. And I'm like, I don't remember him sounding robotic. So either I was not listening closely enough, or the PC version of this game does not have like that inflection. He sounded pretty normal to me, is all I'll say. So he might have had a different experience there. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the speaker like makes it sound more metallic-y, and it's like, or like tinny or whatever. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe robotic isn't the right word. It's almost like it's compressed. If the Bastion announcer was like, him full Barry White, buttery smooth, low voice narration, this one had like just a little bit more of almost like an unpleasantness to it, like an intentional unpleasantness. It was just a little bit less like,
right. Yeah.
So
I suppose that's true. I think that based on what you guys are saying, I missed something playing it on PC that would have been cool to hear through my controller. But oh well, what can we do?
It is what it is. Yeah.
Gonna have to replay it now.
That's right.
It's got a great platinum trophy. Well, okay, one thing that we didn't mention, I did mention that this game is pretty linear, but there are side areas that you can go to that give you like a variety of optional challenges that you can play through. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, how much time did you guys engage with those? Did you mess with them every single time you found them? Did you just poke at them once or twice and then move on? What was your approach?
I did the first one as soon as I got in there because I didn't really know what it was. And then I was like, oh, these all unlock as the game progresses. I'll be completely honest with the audience here. I played this game in the last couple days. Later, I was a procrastinator. So I wanted to make sure I finished it. So I very, very just barely dabbled with that section. Usually when I found that door to like what I think it calls it like the back room or something like that, I would play with a certain something. That's, well, I don't think it's a huge spoiler, but there's something that runs around in there. I would play with that thing, and then I would be like, all right, see you later, and I'd be back out and go back to play the game again. So that was my experience with it.
So that's the most important part, I respected.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think you get much for doing that. They're just fun challenges, right? Like, I think you just get like songs or like
you unlock, like there's a
whatever.
music player in there. You unlock the music, and it gives you extra experience, but that's not really a concern in the game, if I'm being honest. Like, the experience is almost a formality to like gate skills at a certain time, but there's not optional fights, or you're not really grinding, so you just kind of people are pretty much gonna have the exact same experience, and there's no need to boost your levels.
Yeah. I played, I think I did all the speed ones, and then like I tried all of them, and I think I went through the entire speed thing just to see like if there was something, if you did all, I think it was 6 of them, and the 6th one was really annoying, but I did it. But yeah, so they're pretty fun. They're like, if you like the combat, like definitely go do them. Like they're entertaining if you enjoy that combat style. So, and it's actually kind of fun to like try different, because when you go into those challenge rooms, they usually just give you like 3 random ones that you probably haven't used, or maybe you haven't used it as much. It's a good time to like experiment a little bit. I think that's pretty much what they're for, right? Really?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways that they're kind of beneficial, I would say. So I won't list all of them, but there are ones that are just like Josh mentioned, is beating the enemies as fast as possible. There's like a wave-based mode. That one is a little interesting because the game it's almost kind of like a roguelike in a way, where the game will start you with like 3 random abilities and a really small amount of memory. And every wave, they'll give you either one more ability or a little bit more memory. So depending on what your starting abilities are, you're kind of forced to experiment or be creative with stuff that you've not messed around with before. So that helps teach you new things. But if people are going to skip them, and I generally think it's probably fine if you do, the one type that I would suggest people try is, I think it's planning is the name of them. But they give you a scenario and you're already in turn, and it's always defeat every enemy in this one round of turn, which is it basically in one big combo.
Yeah.
That is helpful because that does a little bit more to tutorialize, like you were saying before, Seth, where they have some of those that are set up where it's like, oh, the only way to do this is to, drop a mine and then use an ability that has like a momentum effect that will push the mine through a wall towards the enemies before it blows up. So I can kind of learn, I can bowl with the mines a little bit. I wouldn't have even thought to do that by combining these things.
That is much more Into the Breach, right? Like that is.
I was going to say, it's like a tactical game basically at that point, right?
This is it is the nuts and bolts of this. It is a tactical game. You really can't play it like full pace action. You almost have to use turn in order to really get anywhere. But I always felt like there wasn't a whole lot of punishment for me using turn incorrectly and then running away, right? I don't know how you guys felt. It's like I was always like, well, it doesn't really matter. Like I had wished that the game would have punished me for not being good at it sometimes, other than maybe taking a hit, because that was often not much punishment at all. It always felt a little easy. And I'll be honest, I didn't use a whole lot of the extra difficulty modifiers. I could have done that, but I do like to hear that mode exists in those back rooms, because that's interesting, right? That's I enjoy that type of thing, like challenge me in that way, so I feel like a good gamer rather than like I'm kind of like wading through this game and just waiting for the end to come, right? So
yeah, and not to caveat everything, but it those also suffer a bit from the same thing that when you unlock the functions do, where every time you go into one of those back rooms, only one or two of the doors will be open. You actually can't do all of the optional fights until like 2/3 of the way through a new game plus. Some of them won't unlock naturally over the course of a playthrough. Most of the planning ones will, but you might, you might not see a planning setup that teaches you something new until 2/3 of the way through the game when you optionally find that back room. And so it's like, okay, now I learned a little more about the flexibility of this combat, but once again, I have an hour and a half left to actually engage with that. So it would have been, I almost wish that they would just let you play them, either let you play them in any order or like choose which ones to unlock each time you found a back room and then let you do all of the missions of that subtype once you've unlocked that door or something like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, any other comments about Transistor before we read our campfire chat comment and put it on the quest log today?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. Do you want me to read the comment here?
Yeah. We got one campfire chat comment. I'm just going to keep using that term. If you guys want to send a comment to the show, IndieQuestPod@gmail.com, or go to Blue Sky, IndieQuestPod on there and send us a message. We'd happily read it on the show.
Heck yeah. And we have at least one comment, maybe more, that are unrelated to Transistor that we're keeping in the hopper and we'll read on our next normal episode. So feel free to send them in now. Even obviously it's too late for Transistor comments, but whatever it is that you want to comment on, and we'll read it in the next regular episode. But we have one from our good buddy, friend of the show, Mr. Mo, or as you may know him, Mr. Mo 1984. Interesting name, Stay tuned on that one. Pay attention. Watch the Mr. Mo space is all I'm going to say, because you might be surprised where else they crop up. But Mr. Mo says, "Hey dudes, after playing through the game at the same time as you, I thought it made sense to share my thoughts on it. What I like about Transistor is the combat mechanics. The modular system, which allows you to try out new combinations, including their interactions with passive abilities, was something I personally enjoyed. However, as the game progressed, it became rather repetitive, since I'd already found my preferred combinations. I was rather relieved when I finished the game and too exhausted to go for the Platinum Trophy. Weak. That's an editor's note. It says, initially I was sure to go for it since I have one at Hades and for Pyre. Overall, after Hades and Pyre, I'm not thrilled to see the same colors, voices, and music in Transistor. My excitement for Hades 2 is currently dampened because I feel like I need a break from SuperGiant's style. That's why I'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you see it, and why do you choose to go through the SuperGiant games? Because Hades is so good? Best regards from overseas, Mr. Mo." One of our favorite Germans, I have to say. Okay, I have a lot of thoughts on many of these points, but I'll open it up to the two of you first. What's your reaction? And thank you for writing in, Mr. Mo. As always, we love you, buddy.
I think the reason we wanted to do, I'll answer that last question here, why we decided to do this. I think it's because we all love Hades, right? I really do. To me, these were all just holes in my backlog because I hadn't really played these three leading up to Hades, and Hades is so good. It's kind of cool to see the origin of what turned into one of the best roguelikes and one of the best games ever, right? Like, just to be honest. So that's why I wanted to do it, and I think that's pretty much why we wanted to do it, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it also coincided that we kind of started chatting about it when Hades 2 was announced, right? So it makes sense for us to go through these games because the only one that was actually on the quest log at the time of announcement was Hades, right? And Josh, you've already mentioned, like, you brought Hades to the quest log, and you've said yourself, right? You didn't feel like you did it enough of a favor, or you want to do more of an episode, which makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it was like we were just doing Game of the Year for the first time, so we hadn't really had the parameters to not put stuff on the quest log during Game of the Year. I was like, that's going to get thrown on there because, that's our Game of the Year. That's it. That we didn't really talk about it much, so we kind of want to revisit it and have that deep conversation. So,
and we've each spent a significant amount of time in Hades, and we want to see what were the stair steps that got us here, right? Like I want to see what else Supergiant has to offer. And we're in a unique situation where none of us have really, other than Bastion, we have not really played the middle two games. So it's kind of exciting to go back and experience these. Rather than if we had already all done it, we would probably be more lukewarm about doing it again. But it's kind of a new experience for us. It's a fun little thing.
Yeah, exactly. I'll couch my response to why did we choose Supergiant alongside what you were saying about feeling burnout about Supergiant's style. I personally think that one of the best strengths of Supergiant is that they have like a distinct house style that they twist and bend every time. It's like tremendously rare and very encouraging to see a studio like largely comprised of the same people that are just like getting better over time, able to keep working together for well over a decade. And so far, by my metrics, by the games I've played, improving every time. It's like, that's a rare opportunity. And so that's another way of saying that, yes, I wanted to see how Supergiant grew and evolved. When we went into it, my memories of Bastion were more positive than I think the episode came out. The episode came out positive. It's on the quest log, but I would have assumed I was going to main quest Bastion before replaying it and realizing that's not how I felt anymore. So it was kind of like, dang, here's two bangers. Let me see if these other two are bangers a little bit. And Hades 2, excitement on the horizon. There's also like just a little bit of a couple of convenient factors. One, like Seth said, many of us or all of us haven't played most of these games, which is fun and exciting. And two, I mean, realistically, there's not a lot of indie studios that have like the pedigree of Supergiant and have been out there as long as Supergiant and as consistent as Supergiant without making like direct sequels. And so I think after us doing the To the Moon and those various games, which are directly connected, we wanted to see what would it be like if we did another studio's games that are not directly story connected, but definitely share like an energy and a starting point.
Yeah. The fun thing, at least so far for me, and obviously we've played Hades, so we're kind of cheating there. We're constantly comparing these games to Hades, of course, but the fun thing to me is to be able to watch because of their distinct style and that they do different things. Certainly, they are different games, but you can tell when it's a Supergiant game, like Steve was saying.
Yes.
Like this is quintessential Supergiant. It is fun to see how these games evolve and change through them. They're not actually sequels, but they still kind of feel like you can tell that they're coming after one another, which is fun. It's like we're going back through the history books a little bit with indies. So
yeah, it's like every game is a spiritual successor of the other game, which you don't see that very often, which is awesome.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And then Mr. Mo, to speak more to kind of the nuts and bolts of your feelings on the game itself, I totally can understand, and there's many other games I've played where it felt repetitive because I kind of slotted into my build. For whatever reason, whether it was just my mood or the game, whatever it might have been, for me, Transistor was not one of those. I was very regularly experimenting. Abilities that I had for the first third of the game that I assumed I would never get rid of, I never thought about in the back third of the game because I had an entirely different bar of abilities that I was messing around with. So the experimentation and the encouragement to experiment did work for me. You're saying you were too exhausted to go for the Platinum Trophy. That I can understand, but I will say, kind of reiterate something I said before, which goes into that creative expression and that variety in the combat, is Transistor is one of those rare games that I do think is better in New Game Plus than on the original playthrough. I think it's like a smoother, cleaner, more fun experience to do that second playthrough. And you just have so much more variety, so much more utility, and them adding the duplicate abilities even adds another layer on top of all of that. So this is one of those rare examples of a game where going for the platinum actually made me appreciate the game more, because I would never in my life without a stupid little JPEG to motivate me, I never would have done a New Game Plus playthrough of this game. I'd have been like, there, I'm done. I'm moving on to the next thing. There's 2,000 games that I want to play before I die. But I'm glad that the trophies were there to nudge me in that direction, because it did actually go a long way to improve my feelings around the combat.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. I feel like I did this game a little bit of a disservice having to rush through it. This is, to me, and especially once you get to the end, you kind of start to realize it. This is much more of a slow cooker game and not a stovetop game. Like, toss it in the crock pot all day and you're going to have a really good meal rather than try to hurry up and get it done in 20 minutes. So, if anybody out there, kind of bounced off Transistor, kind of echoing what we've said before, go back, set aside some time, and sit with it, because I think that that's the best way to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with you guys. I basically will be repeating you guys if I keep going on this line, but I really enjoyed the game quite a bit, and I thought that the combat, like I said before, is just so unique that it was really fun to just tinker. Like, I like a game where I can tinker with like the mechanics of it, and this game gave me that. So, hey, it's going to earn points for me just because of that. So, yeah.
Very much so.
All right, so I think this time, we didn't really do this with the To the Moon series, but I think we should rank these. I think it's going to be an obvious ranking for these, like what order it's going to go in, but let's kind of do a ranking, and then let's come together and put it on the quest log too here. Do we want to do the rank first or the quest log first? Which one makes more sense?
I think either one is going to potentially spoil the other. Maybe the quest log should come first, because that's the one we love being the coyest boys about.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just do a 3, 2, 1, and then we're all gonna say where we're gonna put it on the quest log. I think that's the best way to do it. You guys ready?
Wait, is it
all
3,
right.
2, 1 sentiments, or are the sentiments on one? Because I don't want to go early.
3, 2, 1 sentiments.
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Main quest, but it's really close.
Yep.
Okay.
I would side quest this game.
Side quest?
I have held back a lot of my thoughts. I mean, I think that you guys probably realize that I was a little bit more lukewarm on this game than the two of you. But if you guys want to go ahead and explain why you would main quest it, then go for it.
I'll go first. I think that it's a nice 5 to like how long it took me, like 6 hours to play through, and I thought it did take a little while to build up, but once I got my flow with it and got the combat and was in that world, I really was really engrossed in the game, and I think that anybody could have fun with the mechanics if they go in knowing that it's going to take a little time for them to get that flow going. So I would put it on a main quest, and it was one where I did have to sit and think about it for a minute. Like, okay, I could see it going on a side quest. On Tuesday, I could see it on side quest. On Thursday, I could see it on main quest. But for me, it just barely makes it over to a main quest.
I'm pretty much right there with you. I think it goes back to what I said before. I kind of gave away the thesis statement halfway through, but I think this is just a universal improvement over Bastion. Like, this is Bastion 2, what I wanted it to be. I think pretty much every part of it is more fun. I like this slower style of combat more. I do think that it is a little choppy at times in a couple different places. My plan going in was actually going to be socially engineer the two of you to tell me what you think. And if you both side quested, then I was probably just going to quietly allow that to happen without fighting too hard. But after sitting with it for a little bit, and again, having the benefit of a second playthrough that like really gave me more of an appreciation of the combat, it would round up to the bottom half of the main quest for me. Like, if we were to ever do a tier list of all of the main quest games, which, put a pin in that, that's a pretty fun idea someday.
Yeah.
This would be like a C tier, maybe a D tier main quest in my heart.
All right. I suppose that leaves me.
Lay it on us. All right. Transistor, plug your ears if you're still listening, for the love of God.
I don't want to I'm not going to sit here and just, like I said earlier, just crap on this game. I do think that Transistor is a really good game and a very fun experience. We're kind of just doing it now. You guys have kind of already both said a little bit. I personally enjoy Bastion more because I think that Bastion gets to its point, like what it wants you to do with it, and gives you the tools to do it more quickly. They're both fairly, streamlined experiences. They're not long games, but I think, and to the point that Steve made earlier about needing to get a good experience of this game, needing to do 2 playthroughs, I don't think that that's amazing game design. At least not in my opinion. You should be able to give me everything and make me understand and make me have the amount of fun I need to have earlier in your game if you want me to like main quest it in this instance or give it a higher grade on whatever grading scale, right? I shouldn't have to feel like, oh, I've had to play 3 hours of my 5-hour game to finally, have it click, and then another hour after that to finally get to the build that allowed me to have more fun. That's my opinion. So this is one of the rare instances where I think Transistor would have benefited a lot from being a 10-hour game rather than a 5-hour game. And there's my opinion. I will say that I know that there are people in the Discord, and I know there are people out there that have said, yeah, I bounced off of it pretty quick. I would say to those people, go back and play it, because if I didn't have to play this for content creation like we're doing right now, I also probably would have bounced off. I probably would have. But it's like, no, I got to stick through. I got to play this game for the boys. Like I gotta play it. And then like once you get to that later stages of the game, it's like, okay, I'm having fun. I actually enjoy this game now. But it frustrates me a little bit that you couldn't give me enough at the beginning. I can understand in an RPG if it takes 3 hours to get it going, but it's going to be another 20 before I finish it. This is not that game. So
yeah,
that's my personal opinion.
Your comment is like it's kind of uneven, right? The beginning of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It starts out way too slow for me.
Yeah. Is this why you procrastinated? Did you start it and you're like, I'm not feeling it. I'll come back to it.
I had never started it before. I knew that it would take how long it would take. But the thing about it is that's a good point, Josh. Like I started it on Wednesday. I started plenty of time for a 5 to 6 hour, 7-hour game. And I didn't finish it until this morning. Because I just wasn't like I was like, I'd rather play something else right now. Like it's just, and I know you have to be in the mood for things, right? But once I pushed through, once I had to do it, it's like, okay, now I'm having fun. But if it was my choice, I wouldn't have continued. I would have played something else, right? So that's all.
Interesting. Look at this guy. I actually agree very, very strongly with the sentiment that having to do a New Game Plus playthrough to enjoy it is not good design. I would clarify that the way I felt about it is I didn't feel quite as much friction as you did in like the on-ramp into this game. Yeah. I shared some of the frustrations around some of the abilities being unlocked too late. But for the first half of the game, I didn't feel like I was suffering for lack of choice. It was only upon like discovering that those abilities existed that I was like, oh, this is another fun new tool. I wish I had this tool earlier. Yeah. But I never felt like there's a clear gap in my kit that I'm just waiting for them to fill. It was just, I didn't know what I didn't know until I knew it. Where I say that the second playthrough enhanced for me is after I finished the first playthrough, I was extremely split between a main quest and a side quest. Like I was like noodling on it for a day. Like I could really go either way. That's why I was saying I might just gauge the temperature in the room and go from there. It was only after the second playthrough I was like, okay, now I feel like I would main quest it, even with those caveats. So, this is a game though where I'm very sympathetic to however someone would have placed it. Like, let's be real. If you're going to come to me and tell me that Hades is a side quest, I'm like, get out of get out, you clown. Transistor though, I think is a little more. You got to be in the right. be the right type of person with the right frustration tolerance, almost.
And you know,
so
go ahead, Josh. Sorry, no, you go.
Okay, so what I'll say is every time we say the quest log, right, we go, the main quest is a game you can recommend to everybody in your chameleon, whatever. And then you say the side quest is, or I say, the side quest is a game that might have a caveat or two. I'm just saying, this has a caveat or two.
I agree with that. I do. While I personally would side quest it, this is a game that if I played it all the way through with the intention to bring to IndieQuest, I don't think that I would have the guts to bring it here and side quest it. I just wouldn't. I would tell you guys I played Transistor. Probably wasn't exactly my thing. I just wouldn't bring it to the quest log because there. Not saying like I played the whole game and it doesn't deserve to be on the quest log. I think that it is for me a side quest game, but I know that the masses. There are enough people out there that really enjoy Transistor. So I would not be able to bring it and be like, yeah, that's all right. It's a side quest game. No, I completely agree with you guys that it's probably a me thing, or it's in the people that have bounced off of it. Maybe they don't see something in it and totally understand. It's all subjective. So I completely agree with you guys that Transistor is an experience that for a large group of people would deserve to be on the main quest. So I have no issue with that.
I will say, you don't ever need to feel that way. First of all, we side quested Bastion, which is more beloved than this game. So like the Band-Aid's off, buddy. We've already pissed off the SuperGiant fans.
I didn't. If anyone rewinds back to that, I said Bastion should go on the main quest, but I got overruled there. This is 2 in a row. So
damn, this guy's hurting. This guy's hurting. Holy crap. Josh, to what you're saying, like main quest is a game that you can recommend to everyone. I agree with that as a general principle.
I know.
It's like a squares and rectangles thing. I think a game that you can pretty universally recommend to everybody that is great by every metric is an obvious main quest. I don't think every main quest has to be universally recommendable. Sometimes it excels in certain ways that you just appreciate. Honestly, you know how I judge a main quest or a side quest at this point? We've been doing this so long. I look at the list and I treat them like two crowds of people. And it's like, what does this feel more appropriate? Like, what game does this one feel like has peers in that camp? Yeah. Like, would I talk about this game in the same breath as I would talk about the main quest games? Or would I talk about it in the same breath that I would talk about the side quest games? And that's why it's hard for me because, there's definitely some main quest games. That's why I said this like a C or a D rank main quester. Like, dude, come at me with To the Moon, Journey, Sayonara, Wild Hearts, whatever. Like, Transistor is not up there. But then I look at the side quest and I'm like, am I really going to say Transistor and Mutant Mud Deluxe are the same tier? Like, that's just unreasonable. So, and you could pluck examples that like counterprove my point in that same way, but that's how I gut checked it, and that's why I rounded up to a main quest on this one.
Yeah. So, what's the consensus? Are we going to put it on the main quest?
I think so, but I think Drachma firmly side quest, me firmly main quest. Josh, it's time to plant your feet in the ground and tell us where we're ending up.
You're making Josh choose the nicest guy on the planet. He's going to be like, we're going to be here for the next 3 hours.
Flop, sweat, engage.
Thank you for listening to IndieQuest. You guys have a great day. This is the Game of the Year thing with freaking, what was it, Kato and
seriously,
Crypt Custodian again, all over again. Yeah. But no, it's a main quest. Let's put it on the main quest. I think it deserves it. Obviously, you guys listened to an hour plus of us talking about it. If it sounds good to you, and this sounds like it's up your bag. That's not a saying. This is a game that you'd find interesting, or you'd have fun with. You probably will. If you like that strategic element, you like the combat. You're gonna have a good time with it. I think the world is fascinating. I think it's beautiful. It's everything that we said. So yeah, it deserves it. Like Steve says, it's probably going to be the lower tier, and we should do that. Yeah, we should do that tier list of the main quest. That would be really fun. But anyway, main quest.
A thought for that. Up to you guys, right? We could do it whenever it's maybe there's a lull, but That would be a fun live stream.
We should do that as a live. We should do 2 different live streams, one for the main quest, one for the side quest. Yes. Or maybe, honestly, we might have to split it up because, again, there's over 100 games on the main quest.
Yeah.
Even if we talk about all of them for 1 minute, which is impossibly short, that's an hour and a half.
We're going to debate the crap out of it. There's no way.
Maybe we'll take chunks of them and do that on live streams in the future. Let us know if that's something you'd be into, is hearing us tier list out those and see how we feel.
That'd be so fun. Yeah. But so Transistor from SuperGiant is a main quest game. Maybe not with a bullet, with some caveats, but it's still a main quest. So awesome.
It's true.
Well, let's go ahead and do a quick round of plugs, and then we can talk a little bit about that last, the little bit of the spoilery section after the plugs. You can find the show on Blue Sky, IndieQuest Pod, and you can send us emails, comments, questions, concerns, IndieQuestPod@gmail.com. Steve, where can they find you on the internet?
Twitch and Blue Sky is Blinkoom, Blink OOM. What about you, Seth?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Captain Drachma, and of course in the Polymedia Discord, best place on the internet. And if you want to get into that Discord, head on over to Patreon, search up Polymedia, jump into that tier that gets you into Discord, come and chat with us. Josh, where can they find you?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Josh Leslie, or if you're a Drunk Friend fan, Joe Schleslie. You can find other podcasts like this, nostalgia, video games, movies, over at polymedianetwork.com. A lot of good shows over there. Probably too many for one person to consume. I try my best to keep up. There's a lot over there. I love them all, but go check it out. Okay. And I'll go ahead and do some parting words for the folks out there today. From Korn's 7th album, See You on the Other Side. This is the beginning lyrics for Twisted Transistor. Hey you, Devil's little sister, listening to your twisted... I can't even get through without laughing. Twisted Transistor. Hold it between your legs. Turn it up. Low end is coming through. Can't get enough. Stick around for the spoilers if you're interested.
Heck yeah.
That's the way to close it out. That's the way to do it, man.
I was not expecting that.
Now that we're on now that it's after dark, now that we're on the other side of the spoiler wall, I'll give everyone, you have a few seconds. Go away if you don't want to hear Transistor story spoilers. In the meantime, I will point out, Seth, I think you're going to be the people's champion this episode. I think there's a lot of people that are going to feel seen by you, and they're going to be like, at least one of these three guys has his head screwed on right.
It has a lot to do with the fact that I skipped a lot of this extra stuff. That doesn't help. But then again, it all goes back to the same thing. That extra stuff is extra for a reason, right? No one has to do that stuff. If they wanted me to play it, they should have put it into the game, right? Like into the game proper. Make it so I can't get by a certain game without doing that stuff, so they can make me experience the game they wanted. But it's extra, it's optional. So yeah, I mean that's kind of where I'm at there. It's still a fantastic game, and if the last hour and a half of that game was the whole game, it's a main quest for me. It's just kind of drug on its way there.
something I wish I had said before the spoiler wall. All you spoiler heads out there, tell the people that are spoiler nervous about this. The game actually is kind of messed up on the PlayStation 5. Then I was playing the PS4 version of PS5. It crashed randomly like 2 or 3 different times across my 2 playthroughs, one of which actually corrupted my save. And thankfully I had a backup save that was like 40 minutes before where I was, maybe less, so it was not that long to get back to it. But like, you know, clearly they never went back and revisited and did any optimization after the PS5 came out, so whatever architecture differences there are some problems.
I had no issues, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist, obviously. So, yeah.
Did you intentionally make a backup in case, or was that just like lucky you just had a backup there? Like how did it happen that you crashed and you had a backup created?
Well, one, PlayStation will automatically upload your saves for most people. Hopefully it wouldn't upload the corrupted save. You'd have to be fast about downloading it. Yeah. But it actually was just really fortunate for me where I made a backup save. What was it? It was something to do. I have my auto uploads for saves on PlayStation turned off, actually, because every now and again when I'm trying to go for a platinum, it's easier to be able to create a specific manual save that you can revert to. And I had created a save for that purpose. I forget why in the game I did it, but I had made a manual save. And then it was at the very end, after one of the later wave mode optional rooms. I did like a 13 wave room, and then it corrupted in the save after that finished. And so I had to redo that entire 13 wave thing, plus a couple story fights. So kind of a bummer, not something I would really knock the game for, because again, this is like backwards compatibility on a platform that was not going to come out for 6 years from the time the game released. So
yeah, this game was practically a launch title for PS4.
Yeah,
which is kind of crazy.
Exactly. It's like at some point I can't get too mad that, you know, Flappy Bird doesn't run on my 2025 cell phone. Right. But yeah, the story. How'd you feel about this, guys? How do you feel about the story? I want to hear Seth talk about it. Let's drag it, buddy.
I mean, honestly, if I'm being completely honest, I think I quite enjoyed what they gave us with the story, I guess. Yeah. I like the story. I think, like Josh was saying in the episode, either in the episode proper or right before we started recording, I can't remember. But you said, Josh, it was sort of predictable, right? And
yeah, I've kind of predicted like that. Spoilers that she was gonna become either he was gonna come to life in a robot, or she was gonna join him with the transistor. It's like it was gonna go one of the ways, you know. There, so because obviously they had that connection, so like they're gonna be together somehow, right?
Yeah.
And I think that her life, obviously, we know how it ended, right? Her life would have been pretty miserable because she seemingly was one of the last surviving for a long distance. That's why it's like, to me, and this is maybe a little bit of a knock, maybe we need to back up a little bit, but I will just say, to me, it's like, what are you fighting for? Are you really fighting to be the last surviving person on the planet? Because then it's like, who cares? Like, I wouldn't fight so hard. It's like, yeah, okay, take down the bad guys, make them pay for their wrongdoing. But yeah, at the end of the day, everybody's dead. Like, I don't. What difference does it make? It's already done. You're not saving anyone unless there's something outside of like where the progress has made it, right? And it's possible. But the way that they're talking, it's like if you look to the east, it's all white, and if you look to the west, it's all white. There's just nothing. It's all taken over. So at least that's what I gleaned from it. So I don't know what you guys thought.
They don't tell you. I couldn't tell if the intention was there. Yes, there are parts of this like city that have survivors to care about, or again, this entire like civilization is seemingly founded like on some sort of future tech, or like itself is digital in some way. So I don't know if it's like there's other ways to repopulate this place. Yeah. Now that like the data is not being corrupted, like are there copies of the people that lived here that can literally be like downloaded and rebuilt back into the world? I'm not really too sure.
See, though, those thoughts probably come to you from playing 1,000 Times Resist recently, right?
Yeah.
The whole potential
Kinda, yeah.
cloning. We all maybe did this. I guess I'll ask you guys: did you ever read 1984 in school, or do you understand 1984? To me, this was very 1984. It's like the end of times of 1984, right? You got these higher power people that are like watching, and like you can go and vote on these things constantly. Everything that ever happens in the entire world, you technically have a say in. So it's almost like democracy on steroids, right? It's like you get to choose everything, but also you might not get to choose anything for all we know, because there's still like these higher powers that are in control. And I don't really understand how the progress came to be. Maybe they explain that. Like they decided, we're going to create this thing that will basically make it so that any thought that anybody has will be a reality. I can, like at the end, right? I'm thinking about a bridge, so build a bridge. And then it went haywire and just started rewriting everything and killing everything, I guess. But that's kind of what I got from it. But then it's like, okay, so the bad guys are bad, so let's go and take them down. But at what end, really? I mean, so it's it's still a good story in terms of like Red and I guess Nameless Dude in Transistor. I enjoy that part, but kind of everything that's going on around it was a little, I don't know, kind of a little weird to me.
Yeah, Red and Big T, they hung out in the garden for the rest of eternity, as far as we know, right? That's pretty much. They did bring up the garden, which quote unquote, like multiple times throughout, like some of the like character descriptions, and they brought it up. That's basically where he is at, which I guess that's just like a simulation of his memory or his existence, right? Or his soul, quote unquote. I'm not sure how that really works, but hey, it's future. You can explain anything away from it. It's like AI, it's the future, whatever, I guess, right?
Also, I feel like it was a little bit lucky. Like, was it ever truly explained that if I stab myself with this sword, I am absolutely going to be part of this transistor, right? Like, I guess, hopefully. But what if Red did that and just died and didn't become part of the transistor, and it just ends that way? You don't know. Like, I don't know. So
that goes to why I'm like wondering, is this an entirely digital society, right? Because the other people that you come across that are dead, you gain their abilities by essentially absorbing their data into the transistor. So I assume Red thought the same thing would happen to her. She would die and her data would go into the transistor. Why you get data out of dead people, to me, doesn't make sense, again, unless it's like these are all people living inside of a circuit board somewhere or something, or like a computer simulation. But it's a little weird in that, like, most of the people you absorb in the game are part of this like shadowy evil group, and it's like, I don't think they're living in the sword. Like, maybe the transistor has some agency to choose like how the data is integrated into itself, but I'm not too sure.
Yeah, and for me, I think that's another check in Bastion's favors. Like at the end of Bastion, I understand.
It was clear.
I get it. I know what's going on here. And is it revolutionary? No, but it still makes a lot of sense and is good. Like Zolf, like everything makes sense, and it's a solid story. While I think it is a good story, and I care a lot about the characters. Like when Red did that at the end, right? And Dude in Transistor's like, please don't do that. Like you feel that. Absolutely. Like you're like, oh, that is heart-wrenching, because you care about these two characters and the way they've interacted through your several hour playthrough. It's just everything outside of that, I don't necessarily care about that much. And I don't really understand other than bad guys are bad and we need to take down bad guys. So
yeah, I think to give folks that didn't play this and just want to understand the story, or that like skipped the story, the like really high level beat by beat is that, as we said, there is this society, it's either digital or hyper futuristic, whatever it might be, that exists kind of as like a utopian sort of Garden of Eden-ish kind of future world. It seems like generally it's designed to please its inhabitants.
one of my notes was utopian dysfunction.
Yeah.
It's like what happens at the end of the happiness, right?
Yes.
It's Bioshock, right? Like,
Very
Right.
much so. Yes.
Man, that's crazy. You know, one thing. Okay, just tangent. I just played Bioshock Infinite, which I told you guys before the show, and almost some of the art design is kind of similar in some respects between the games, and I don't know.
It's got like it's
that.
throwing back in some cases to like the 20s and 30s, right? Like the
Right,
like classical style. So yes, there's this utopian-ish society where the residents live, and it seems like initially one person, and he brings on other people, basically becomes power hungry in this world or wants to see it changed for whatever reason, and he forms this sort of like shadow group of influential figures called the Camerata. He brings one person in and another person in, another person in, and a lot of these are people that are either like politically influential or have like strong social status. They're people that are like important in this society, and they are doing some sort of shadowy work together to try to rebuild this utopian society in the image, either in the image that they want to see, or maybe they're trying to give power back to the people, whatever it might be. They don't think that the way that things are is the right way for them to be. And the ultimate culmination of that is that they design the Transistor, which is this sword that you carry around that seems to be powerful enough to like manipulate the world that you inhabit, basically. And as a second part of that, they design this like AI robotic army function called the Process. That's all the enemies you fight throughout the game. And they basically lose control of the Process. And the Process run amok and start taking over the city and start basically, like a computer virus, erasing parts of the city, turning it into something that they can use to then breed and continue to spread. I don't know the specifics. I don't know if the game tells you. All that happens before the start of the game. You seem to start the game kind of like on the eve of the shit really hitting the fan.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, Red was a target for these people and has lost her voice as a result of this attack. I will pause and ask you guys, do we know why Red lost her voice? Is that given out in the game or in one of the character bios? Because if so, I missed it.
I didn't see it in game. I looked that up, and I never like got a good conclusive answer other than she was extremely influential and potentially had sway, right? And so it's like easiest way to take down a potential figurehead who a lot of people look up to is just to take away their ability to speak. So
okay, yeah, she's like the most. She's a singer. She's presumably like the biggest celebrity in this society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then if we want to take it to the high-minded levels, like if this is like a whole civilization that is basically like a process, like a whole like simulated world, maybe they can just type in a couple code and then her voice just goes away.
That's true.
If that's the case.
Could very well be in whatever ways they've learned to manipulate the world. So that's where the game starts. You play through the game kind of like one by one, seeking out the members of the shadow group. There's like 5 or 6 of them. They're pretty much all dead by the time you find them, other than the last one.
Sybil. You fight.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you fight Sybil. She's like
a
turned into a Process because she's like kind of being assimilated in real time, and you fight her as an enemy.
And that's where I thought, I don't think that everyone's androids. I feel like everyone's organic because it says in her description that when you fight her, she has become like androided or whatever, like morphed with robotic technology. So that's why I figure like, okay, so that tells me that Red is not like Red is like human or fleshy or whatever, right? But yeah, I mean, it doesn't. Who knows, right? So
could very well be. Yeah, it's definitely left nebulous. So you play through, you fight all the various members. Most of them are dead. A couple that you fight. You get to the very end of the game. What's his name? Is it Asher? Royce? Is he the last one?
Asher is. So while we're here, while we just mentioned Asher, you get a lot of communication in these like boxes throughout the game, right? Where you can vote on things. And for like the latter half of the game, much of it you are getting communication from Asher, who is a member of the Camerata. And at first you're like, okay, this guy seems like an evil douchebag. But then as you keep going, you realize that, like these people, the Camerata, yes, they had lofty goals, but they weren't necessarily terrible people. They weren't trying to be evil and kill everyone. They were trying to do what they thought was best, and it got out of hand. And now they don't know what to do. And then Asher's like, as you keep progressing further towards where Asher and Grant are, you realize that there's more panic. There's like, he starts apologizing, and it's like, okay, and then you get there and Asher and Grant kill themselves right before you even have a chance to talk to them. So it's one of those things where it's like, there's some realization there with that, with this bad group that, we did the wrong thing. So.
Yeah, these are not Rita Repulsa sending the putties out to kill everyone in town. Like they were trying to use the process and the transistor, these tools that they have to reshape society into ways they felt appropriate, and it got away from them. They messed up and they know it, but they're still the bad guys for having initiated this. But your whole goal throughout the game is to hunt them down. You're kind of on a vengeance quest, which you learn why in a sec. We'll get to it, but you're on a little bit of a vengeance quest, and you're trying to undo this, which you kind of ultimately come to learn that for whatever reason, you'll be able to sort of stop the spread of the process by bringing the transistor back to where I assume it was initially created, or it is some terminal that they created with the intention to put the transistor into it to give them more authoritative access over this world. But you're trying to bring the transistor back to this place where it initially was. You do that, you fight Royce in a boss fight because games have to have boss fights, and then after that you're spit back into the world, and you now seemingly have the ability through the transistor to like repair the corruption and return the world back to the state that it was in before. So you do that, and then at the very end of the game you have the realization, I mean, you've probably worked it out in a lot of cases, but you have the realization at the end of the game as you come up on one of the dead bodies that body and the voice in the transistor that's been talking to you this whole game is your husband or your partner, this significant person to you.
Is that true? Because honestly, I could be completely wrong on this, but I felt like it was almost like a trauma bond in a way. I didn't think they knew each other prior to this, but maybe they did.
In the credits of the game, they show pictures that seem to be like snapshots of their life. And it's like them on a date, her writing music, and him standing over her giving her tea.
I thought that was pictures in the transistor. So that's
I thought so too.
Events that were taking place post her going into the transistor with him.
I read those as this is their relationship because one, they're like sepia toned, like this happened in the past. And two, they specifically show her like writing music and stuff, and it's like, well, she's not performing. Presumably she's not performing in the transistor in this farmhouse and field with just the two of them.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you're totally. It was weird to me, and it makes total sense because he says like things like "I love you" and things, and it's like you guys haven't been together that long for that to be the case. So, but it just seemed weird that she happened upon him the way that she did, but yeah, I mean, another weird plot hole,
it's maybe like open for interpretation, right? Like, is that in a transistor? Is that back in the day? Like,
right?
Maybe it's the idea of her killing herself with the transistor. It was kind of like did she survive? Are they in the transistor? It's kind of just like question mark at the end more than So I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a Romeo and Juliet thing, except Romeo doesn't stand back up at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, the last scene then is you come across this. Red willingly kills herself with the transistor so her data or whatever, her soul, can be absorbed by the transistor, and then you live with Mr. T, as we'll call him, in the sword at the end of the game. And that's why when all three of us, especially me and Josh, sent pictures of the credits of this game, we cut off the left side of the screen that shows her like in a sundress standing in a field so that you couldn't see it.
With him, right?
Yeah,
like that's the key. Yeah.
And that ending, I think, is very effective. It's very emotional, like Seth said. His like pleading is very earnest with her, where there's like a real desperation, like, "What are you doing? Stop!" But it was also foreshadowed pretty well earlier on, because at some point you go to her house and like as part of your vengeance, and as you're leaving, Transistor says, "Oh, you locked the door, but you don't have your keys. How are you going to get back in?" He asks her that, and then he pauses for a second and very depressed, he goes, "Oh." Like he becomes very aware, like, "Oh, you're not coming back home. You don't intend to either you don't intend to survive this in the end when you're done, or you don't think you're going to live through these events." But either way, it was foreshadowed where he's like, "Yeah, you're not." You could tell from that moment that Red is clearly like made up her mind already from the start of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I do really like Red as a character, because I feel like Red is not some superhero, superhuman being. She's literally a singer. Like that's what she is. Down to the point where when Red walks with the Transistor, she can't even carry it. She's dragging it everywhere. It still looks badass. Like it looks awesome. But truly the reason she's able to do the things she is throughout the entire game is because of the Transistor. The Transistor is that strong. So it's just kind of cool to think like, if one of us were in a situation like this, we could do it, right? Like because of that weapon of death, basically, or weapon of creation. It's kind of both. It can kill and create as much as it wants to. I just like that they weren't like, "Oh, this is some badass cop character or whatever." No, they literally made her like a dainty singer, and then she just murders all this AI throughout the entire game with this super weapon. So I liked that about it.
Yeah.
It's pretty badass.
Yeah.
And she's a very like tragic character in that regard, which is why, again, I'm gonna show you the figure again. It makes no sense to me that she's like got this big smile. She's so happy in this figure. I'm like, girl, that's not the night you're having. All right.
The only time she smiled in the entire game was when she had a nice slice of za in her apartment. That was it. There was no smiling outside of that.
Or when she's petting the dog in the
or that,
or whatever, right?
There's like
or
kind of a
maybe when
playful
moment.
When she's about to put the Transistor in her chest, she might be smiling then because she's like, "Well, it's done," So,
I should mention, as part of that ending, which is I think pretty effective, the like very last thing you hear in the game is him in the Transistor saying, like, "It's good to see you," and it's her saying hi. Like she has literally one line of voice acting, and it's.
You
like
waited the whole game for it. That's very, very good.
Yeah,
that's
good.
true. Yep,
delivered super well. Very, very smart to end on that note. Like that's the perfect way to close the story out. That was like those parts of the story, that ending in particular, and some of the like little bits of foreshadowing, were the parts where I'm like, all right, this is pretty good. And even if the rest is not like explicitly detailed out, like I get a sense of what's going on.
Yeah.
Yep. I thought it was good. All in all, a great story. Like you said, it does have a good payoff. Even if you're lost in the weeds with some of these names and just throw all the lore that gets thrown at you. But
we grazed over it. For the most part, combat is good, like throughout the game, especially towards the end. But I personally thought that final boss fight was pretty fun. It was almost like
that was awesome.
It was like you had to fight yourself in a way, right? I mean, this Royce,
shadow version of yourself.
It would not count because it's
the top spot over here.
The smell test. Nice try.
Yeah. But it's cool that you're going into this, and up to this point you were just super powerful, right? Because you had a Transistor, but then you have to go against Royce, who also has Transistor, and you don't even get to see like what he's doing. Like sometimes the planning that he takes was like, I'm like, did the game stall? No, it's like the background, the AI in the game, the computer is going through and selecting based on your position. It's very cool. I enjoyed it a lot. So,
again, not to just keep being like, well, maybe you should have New Game Plus if you wanted to enjoy this game. One of the doors in the side rooms that never was available in the first playthrough in New Game Plus is called Agency, and it's a series of fights of literally you versus yourself with that setup, with your opponent can also take turns. And so you get a bunch of like increasingly difficult versions of that fight against yourself. as like
Nice.
side content in New Game Plus.
That's
And
cool.
those
I
were
like that.
like maybe my favorite ones to do. 'Cause, yeah,
That makes so much sense. Yeah. Yep.
I get that them saving it for the last boss made it like, whoa, like, oh man, like for the first time, I feel like I'm against an opponent that the Transistor is at least equal to.
Right.
But it almost would have been fun if more enemies had more of that ability earlier in the game to like mess around and play with, because it was so fun. They do have abilities that mess with your turn, where they like obscure the screen, or like if you run over certain spots, it will stop turn cold, which is cool, but they never like truly just mess with like the mirror matchup in that way.
Yep. One other point before the final boss, you fight these. I don't know what were they called, like the man or the guy or something like that, and they all like shot out those like shadow groundhog dudes that like were in the ground,
Yep.
And you fight more and more of them as you go. I thought that's where it's like, okay, this is the pinnacle for me of what this main game is doing. Like that was really fun, trying to not only position yourself behind them when they weren't in stealth, right? Like there was so much going on there. You'd almost have to get close to them when they were in stealth, and then allow them to present themselves, and then attack. And then you have to turn and then figure out how to get rid of the ad and get behind them, or that in my case, right, I would like nuke them. But like that was really fun. That last hour leading up to Royce for me was the best combat in the entire game. That was a really good time.
Oh, yeah.
So
Totally agree on that one.
Yeah, the last hour is the game's best foot forward, because again, that's after you got all the abilities. That's when they like mess with it, and like you walk on the ceiling and stuff sometimes, which is just kind of like a neat little visual trick, or like you have to go back through the door that you just came in from, which is like just little navigation things that it's been pretty straight up to that point, and so it's fun when they mix it up. But
did you guys ever figure out why the Transistor was drunk sometimes?
it was
just a monster?
its proximity to that monster or
Spine thing?
Like the
Okay.
corruption or whatever.
I don't know
it was,
if it's specifically that monster, or if it's like a density of the process or something. But yeah, he being near that like giant claw creature is what did it.
Did you guys ever walk into the back room when he was like that and listen to what he has to say? Because the one time I did, because he starts talking normal, probably so they don't have to create voice lines for his corrupted version in the back room. But he says, when I'm about to walk back out, he was like, "Don't listen to me, right? I'm being a little like, don't listen to me out there. Like I'm not going to make a lot of sense," or something along those lines. So I thought that was a cool touch.
Yeah, that is very nice. And this game is just like Bastion in that there's so many contextual little. You'd be running like kind of close to an area, but not running towards it. And you'd be like, "Oh, hey, around the corner, there's a terminal over there." And you're like, "Oh, hey, thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate that." Or he'll be like, "Hey, there's a door back there that I think leads to one of those back rooms. Go check it out." I'm like, "Good looking out."
There was one time I doubled back where I shouldn't have, and he's like, "Oh, you're just looking for stuff over? I'm not sure there's anything over here." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, I thought that was kind of cool.
Thank you. Any other closing thoughts, boys?
I think we covered it.
Yeah.
Longer than I thought we would talk about the story, but there's a lot to it. So if you guys are stuck around, listen to the spoilers. Let us know how you feel about the game. Send us messages on our email and Blue Sky, Discord, whatever, and we'll talk about it later on in another episode and bring it up again to see what the audience has to say. If you guys gave this game a shot and listen to the episode because of it.
Heck yeah! Now, I'm really hoping that Josh, that we agree with Seth on Pyre. I'm gonna feel bad if he gets overruled three times in a row. I mean, Hades is a guarantee, but I'm hoping for Pyre to line up.
I hope
Fire is the one that's like my biggest blind spot. I know it's like sports related. That's all I know. There's a sports element to it. That's all I really know about it. So I'm going in really blind with that one.
I've heard it's also one of the more divisive ones. So I doubt that this is going to stop anytime soon.
Same. I've also heard this is just to warn the two of you guys. I've also heard that of all their games, it's easily the most wordy. Like it's got parts that are like closest to like visual novel almost. So be prepared for like a very text heavy game when you go in, so that you don't like suddenly feel like
get
the
blindsided
anchors around your ankles.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I'm about to start Citizen Sleeper too. I don't mind that once in a while.
Oh,
So.
it rules so hard. It's so good, man. Or maybe it's bad.
If you
Maybe
guys
it'll be a
stuck
side
around,
quest. Who knows?
Or maybe it'll never come here. You're just.
Well,
I feel like that's a
never know.
straight. Like this can be cut, but I feel like Steve's just like, yeah, it's probably going to be on the next episode, but maybe not. But
Yeah.
maybe not.
Talk to me in 2 weeks. Or no. Who's to say?
Right.
all right. Thanks, guys, for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Maybe we might have a guest. Who knows? We'll see.
Impossible
Well, we'll
to
see
say.
you next time.
You know, American, German, who's to say?
All right. Bye, everyone.
Peace.
See ya.